Hello, and thank you for joining us for another episode of PrecisionCycle BTS. I'm Enrique, founder of Elevate.epo. I wanted to use this BTS platform to talk a little bit more about the casework that we do here at Precision Cycle and really have more of a interactive virtual supervision to presentation of some of the cases that we're working on. I want to talk about 3 clients that I've worked with this week, some of the things we've seen and the breakthroughs we've had. Hopefully you'll find some of this worthwhile and will help you in your clinical practice, or it'll resonate with you as someone looking for some type of therapy alternative in the post-therapeutic model. If that's something that appeals to you, then hopefully we can have a further discussion on your needs. This week, one of the major themes is triangulated power and enmeshment. We had 3 different cases, but in those 3 cases, we saw how all of them showed extreme emotional incest, where caretaking and control replaces respect. Power is negotiated through guilt and withholding rather than clarity and differentiation. So the way that we saw it was 3 different clients. We saw first with Dave. Dave was caught in a triangulation between himself, his daughter, and his wife. Financial decisions were essentially being made by the daughter, and that became this masked control that was masked as concern. His authority ultimately is undermined by emotional manipulation and intergenerational guilt. With Dylan, my second client, struggles to maintain healthy relationships with their live-in partner while triangulating with their family and projecting unmet needs for validation into flaky friends. Finally, with another client, Shane's grief and addiction recovery are entangled in a legacy of codependency with their ex, who happened to just pass away, a chaotic home environment, and a lack of containment from family members who fail to recognize and understand boundaries, or her addiction. With these dynamics, we see how the enmeshment brings a lot of this tension to their personalities, which then leaves them with a lot of unresolved anger and frustration. That anger and frustration is what feeds your depression. A big theme that we can't get away from, unfortunately, in the society is money as proxy for love, power, and control. We see how money corrupts. Absolutely. Even at the family level, when we're talking about Dave, the major sticking points and fights he has to work through with his family is completely about money. And money becomes a weapon in the family politics. Dylan is financially strained as well, downplays it while they're seeking a job as they just graduated from college. Emotionally, however, they feel isolated and they're projecting a lot of their success and their failures onto broken friendships. We see how money is the root cause of a lot of this anger. With Shane, they have a long history of financial dependency on other people, both partners and family. To mask the dysfunction, this becomes a major point in their struggle to have healthy relationships with their family. In all cases, money is not about economics. It's about who controls the story and the narrative, who owes whom, and what scenario. This is textbook covert narcissism in the family systems. Whenever it's about control, that is narcissism 101. And that is something that you have to absolutely take the Band-Aid off, take the blanket off, and expose, because families shouldn't be involved as business dealings. They're not firms. They're not the types of organizations doing fiduciary responsibilities. Families are families. There's a reason why they say you shouldn't do business with family. Third, major theme of the week, unmet needs for authentic expression of self. Again, we see how Dave is silenced through condescension and gaslighting by his wife and daughter. Dylan repeatedly tries to talk, but is invalidated and minimized by their partner at times. And thus that creates even more tension and isolation in the relationship. Shane disassociates from their grief, unsure if they're even allowed to mourn or grieve the passing of a former partner because they're so caught up in their head about whether the family hates them or not because they broke up or they cheated. These are the guilts that people live with. But we see how being unable to really express the self has them caught all up in themselves, unable to really move forward with any type of real healing of the grieving process. They all struggle to be emotionally heard, but are ultimately punished. This is the core of relational trauma. Expression equals danger. Suppressed masculinity or authentic self is a big theme as well, having to mask someone's own power. Dave is regulated by female authority figures, which then leaves him infantilized. Dylan's intellectual curiosity And emotional nuance is downplayed by their partner who resents their development. And finally, Shane suppresses the truth to avoid conflict and is haunted by shame rather than empowered by ownership of themselves. In each case is a war between the emerging self and the system that punishes differentiation. Precision cycle becomes the path forward for sovereignty. Fifth theme of the week, pattern recognition and breakthrough, with where the precision cycle difference comes into play. In each session, the client begins to recognize the loops. Dave sees the daughter's actions as hysteria and as a control play, not as real concern. Thus, the mask has been torn off and Dave sees it fully for what it is. Dylan connects their anger to childhood wounds and projection. And finally, Shane links their grief to suppressed gratitude and unprocessed shame. These sessions are less about healing and more about tactical recalibration, naming the game so they can just stop playing it. That's what Precision Cycle does, and that's why we are different than therapy. So shifting to how Precision Cycle has helped them on the recalibration plan moving forward, Dave felt that he was run by his daughter. There was financial gatekeeping with himself and his wife, which led to a lot of emotional guilt tripping and this big dust up they had as a family. Essentially, Dave wanted to spend money on a certain thing. Daughter got upset because she didn't approve. And then wife ended up taking the daughter's side and blaming Dave for being out of pocket. In the past, he would have over-explained that. He would have gone into himself. He would have self-doubted, and he would have accepted the role of the confused old man, which is what they were trying to projective identify within him. How Precision Cycle has changed Dave. 1, he was able to identify his daughter's behavior as narcissistic and histrionic, not protective. Number 1, that's important. See how people are coming and see what their intentions are, even if they are family members. 2, he named the core wound. His masculinity was under occupation by his own family. He didn't even have ownership of his own power because it had been stripped away by women who wanted to control him. 3, he positioned his daughter's financial obsession as projection of her own failures, of her own insecurities, and not a critique of him. He was able to understand that she is dealing with her own issues and they are not reflective of anything that is going on with him. So we begin to see how Dave reclaims his agency. Quote, "I don't think you're qualified to talk to me about this." That was the sentence that he was able to formulate about how he could potentially speak to his daughter. And of course, that is a true statement. His daughter isn't a homeowner like he is. His daughter doesn't have kids and raise a family like he did. So he's right. She is not qualified to speak on any of those topics. With him imposing that boundary is the first step to reclaiming his power. He named the core wound. His masculinity is under occupation by histrionic forces. Finally, he positioned his daughter's financial obsession as project. So we see how Pete begins to reclaim his agency. He begins to frame his relationships with his family and his wife in terms of power. The emotional whiplash of all that is replaced by, is this minimal amount of money that we're arguing about really worth how you're making me feel right now? At the end of the day, that's really the calculation to make. He concluded, no, it's not worth it. So we see how we begin to transition from the reactive to the declarative, no longer asking for permission, but stating his own value. With Dylan, we see how someone goes from a ghosted graduate who was upset that nobody showed up to the graduation party to an emerging matriarch. Dylan was left living in an echo chamber of adolescent friendships, trying to recreate belonging through validation. And then their partner invalidated their thoughts, weaponized their education, and avoided real emotional labor in the relationship because he was so insecure of his lack of education. The Precision Cycle interventions. It named the partner's defensiveness as projection of inferiority, not a lack of love. This completely opened up the field because now the resentment built there in the relationship was gone. Dylan understood that partner's not really mad, just projecting that he is not as smart as she is. Reframed their own neediness as a healthy signal of isolation and unexpected grief. Finally, gave them the script that said, can you just listen? I don't need any advice right now. And that's really a key thing for people to understand. Oftentimes when we show up in relationships, we want to talk to someone, we had a hard day, we want to unload. We get into this mode where we just feel entitled to speak to someone and dump everything that's inside of us onto them. the other person is entitled to not sit there and listen. We get upset when they try to interject and give us advice. That's when we have to ask or clearly put the boundary down. I have this to tell you. Can you just sit and listen without giving me any advice? If they say, no, that's fine. Is there a time when I can? Or I'll go find someone else that'll do that function for me. Thus, there's no misunderstanding. You don't cross the streams and you have a relationship that's built on solid communication. That is language that is very specific and now is going to help them be able to navigate that relationship more clearly. The restructuring here is that Dylan stops chasing old friends they have clearly surpassed and redirects focus towards people who are actually worth it and are showing up in their lives, family, and people who actively want to create community with them. They begin to realize this isn't about some party that people didn't show up to. This is about the fantasy of who they used to be in the past and the understanding that they are now past that and on to this new phase in their life, and begins choosing jobs, routines, and relationships based on energy in versus energy out, not nostalgia. Now it's about how do I obtain this new thing that I want, which is this postgraduate life and all of the things that are in that go into that. The outcome then, Dylan becomes reparented by their own work in real time, learning to sit in adult disappointment and build a new architecture. Finally, Shane, we moved them from guilt-ridden to self-contained person in recovery. The old structure, Shane, they use relationships and substances to regulate their emotional chaos. Classic reaching out for external validation and controls to help them satiate the anxiety inside themselves. They believe they owed people salvation through self-sacrifice, people-pleasing, which fed further the addiction and the eating disorder. The precision cycle intervention, we expose the false binary. I grieved him already versus I'm allowed to mourn. This was something they were really stuck on. They were stuck on this idea that they had already grieved the end of the relationship. And we came to help Shane look at, you can grieve the relationship and the end of the relationship. You've done that. But now it's time to grieve the actual person who lost their life. That is something separate, and we shouldn't conflate those two. We were able to differentiate that, and now they understand they can grieve a person who was very close to them. They were in a relationship for 3 years. We reframed the relapse fantasies they were going through and the dream they had as enactments of shame, not desires. And that was really big because we were able to make sense of this really obscure dream that they had, where it was multiple layers of shame working itself to the conclusion that regardless of how, if we re-engage in our compulsions, in our addictions, we will be left out there for everyone to see our bad behaviors. Finally, we decoded the dream symbolically to reveal the unconscious clarity that lived underneath, which was a real desire to remain sober and an internal awareness of just having one shot leads to. They were able to describe in this dream how one shot led to this other bigger, more destructive outcome. So what we're seeing here, restructuring of this precision cycle, Shane now understands that grief and guilt are different energies, and mourning their ex doesn't invalidate their recovery. They're now choosing to attend the funeral not out of obligation, but to close the loop and mourn the person that, again, was really close to them and they were close to for 3 years. Finally, begin the journaling of and placing their current ex-partner in a supportive role with clear boundaries, not using them as an escape. The outcome here is that Shane goes from dissociative and passive to narrative sovereign, authoring their own story with psychological dignity and somatic awareness and precision. So what we were able to deliver across all three cases here is truth without shame, boundaries without guilt, power without apology. They all inherited a story they never wrote. Now they're writing new ones with their eyes wide open. This is what we've seen this week in Precision Cycle. This understanding and this movement from this old way of processing information and anxiety, which kept us stuck in our own loops and anger, to how we now actively start to place boundaries, not only within ourselves, but externally, so that we are maintaining a level of self-calibration that is appropriate and allows us to go out there and do the things that we have to do and do the things that we want to do as human beings in this world. That is Precision Cycle BTS for this week. 3 cases. Hopefully you have gained some type of insights from this case analysis, supervision, presentation. Feel free to contact me, Enrique at elevateepo.com, Precision Cycle TV on Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, and X. We can have further discussions on Precision Cycle method. We're also running the final days of our June calibration call. Get in while we have the specials of the month. Sit down with us and see how Precision Cycle can help you get the results you are looking for and achieve that new life you're trying to get to. Thank you very much for your time. My name is Enrique Arteaga. This has been Precision Cycle, brought to you by elevate.epo. Thank you, and we'll be back tomorrow with another episode of Precision Cycle. Thank you.